Hey folks, welcome to another video on Inkwell Ideas stuff. This is all about Hexploration decks. This is our sample deck, which we'll have a link to where to pre-follow this. We're going to be putting it up on Backerkit's crowdfunding second half of January. Not sure exactly when yet, but it should be out or should be available to support back in the second half of January. But if you want to pre-follow it, be notified when it launches. Please do. That helps us out for our planning purposes. What we're looking at is three different decks of these cards, these Hexploration decks, and potentially a fourth. We'll see. But they're all written. The art is already done actually for them. They just need to go through some more editing. And like I said, we've got a sample deck which draws about 1/3 of those first three of each of those first three decks into one sample deck. And the core concept here is that you would use these cards to create your starting campaign area, whether it's a hex crawl or if it's going to be a point crawl, or a fantasy sandbox is another term. But it really comes down to me player-driven campaigns where you have a starting area, a town or something where they're starting, and you might detail a handful of places nearby, and then you can feed the players some rumors based on that. And you might also have a second layer a little bit further out of, again, just a handful, maybe 10 in all, maybe seven in all locations that are kind of more stronger power bases, but they still might have an impact on the starting campaign area. And then feed those rumors to the players and see where they want to take things, where they want to take the campaign, where do they perceive the biggest threat or the most important thing to do, and then continue it on from there. So these decks are going to have three types of cards, as you might have been reading as I'm talking here. You've got some location cards, which are the majority of them, and we're going to get into those in detail. The trait cards, we're also going to talk about those in detail, and reference cards as well. So let's dive into a couple of them, and we're going to just jump down to the first portrait artwork piece, which is the Usurper's Fortress. And each of the cards, you can pick or you can pull them randomly for your campaign area. And you might want to pick based on the artwork. You might want to pick based on the name. You might want to read a couple of the bullets, and you find something that's a good fit for what you're thinking the campaign is all about. Whatever works for you. But these are going to really help to expand your imagination. I like to think that I've got a pretty good imagination myself. But Andrew Shields, the writer of pretty much all this, it does a great job. I love all the work. He's written a lot of the side quest decks for us and PC decks and so forth. And he just always delivers a high amount of cool ideas per word count, if you will. So these decks are definitely right up his alley, and I might be able to come up with a couple of these ideas that are on these cards, in each chart. But I mean, he gives some that I would never expect. Like here, rumored ways in or out of this fortress. There's some anti-flyer lightning crystals on burned out or chipped that are burned out or chipped. So they're slow to shoot, or there might be a gap in some sort of defensive field that it has around there. And that whole thing, that one point there might just drive this in a completely different direction. Maybe you weren't thinking high magic, or maybe you want to put some science fiction into your fantasy. Those that kind of thing can really drive this location, or even the starting campaign area. But if that's too much for you, there's it's normal stuff too. Like, hey, last option there, an escape tunnel ends in a nearby hollow tree, which kind of very much reminds me of Princess Bride. So you get the idea that you can use these, and there's also some charts that we'll get to towards the back of the deck, that will help you detail the basics of locations. Because you coming up with things like the age, and a chart for the age and a chart for the condition and stuff is kind of simplistic, and that's actually, honestly, the kind of stuff that I was starting out with. And Andrew was like, no, we can do so much better. Well, he didn't say it quite so bluntly, but I think that's probably what he meant. So that's this one card, and I should point out that the sample deck. So we'll have a link to get to follow this to be notified when the crowdfunding launches. Like I said, in towards the second half of January, we'll have a link to get notified when that happens below the video, and we'll also there's a link on that page to get the sample deck, so you can print it out and give it a try. Let's dive into another one of these cards. Let's again just kind of jumping ahead. So here we've got something that's a little bit more basic. We've got Miller's Crossing, but if you want to skew this towards something very unusual, very high fantasy or dark fantasy even, here we've got who runs the mill. There's a necromancer using undead labor to use it, which is kind of a interesting concept. But there's also plenty of normal options as well. Um, Diving down, so the first third of the sample deck is all going to be from what we're calling our settled lands. These are locations that are more going to be more skewed towards having villages, towns, cities, that sort of stuff, or locations that are things that people have built, like this shrine here. Um, and then, but you do still have something, well, of course, this might be some drow fortress or drow fortress location kind of thing. But you've got a number of locations that people of all different types, I should say, have built. Um, then we'll get to the other we'll get to the other two decks in a moment. But continuing with the settled lands deck and the samples from there, we have these trait cards, which then you can apply to the other locations. Where if you want to say, hey, if that Miller's Crossing is haunted, then here are some things to think about. Why is it haunted, and what form does the haunting take, and how might we end the haunting? So there's several ideas like that, and there's about 10 cards front and back that have these kinds of properties. So there's guild base is the back of that card, good hunting, expensive taxation. So different things that you might want to apply to any of the other cards, and it could apply to cards in the other decks too. There's no reason why the haunted location traits can't be used for one of the other decks as well. Um, so then the second part of this sample deck is coming from what we originally calling like a Beyond the Pale deck, but I think we're going to likely be changing that to be something. It's that the concept is otherworldly or elemental-ish, Feywild-ish, Shadow Realm-ish, that kind of thing, where you've got something a lot of strangeness is happening with these locations. So here we've got an entry gate to a place like that. Here, very very much reminds me of the Legend of Grayskull, He-Man stuff. But this particular graphic. But you've and I love. Speaking of, I love the art. This is all by the Forge Studios. We've been supporting them on Patreon for quite a while, and finally getting a chance to use a bunch of the art that we've built up with them, and also commission some special, unique stuff with them that they're doing just for us. So we've got more locations that are in this, that are more magical, like I said, more mystical, more otherworldly, if you will. And so here you've got, the door guard. There's imps in the eye sockets. That's kind of cool. As I look at these, you kind of come up with even, you kind of see new things, or new to me, when I'm coming to it with a fresh pair of eyes. So yeah, it's a lot of fun stuff. A lot of here the deep tower. Crystal function. You got these floating crystals up there. Zap the intruders, kind of like what we were talking about with the other card. But hey, it's a ghost prison, so there's a ghost imprisoned in those crystals. Really interesting imaginative stuff. So that's what the second deck is all about, is this Beyond the Pale. And again, you're getting or otherworldly, mystical, magical stuff. And you're going to get, a full 54 cards of that, where about 40 of them are these locations. And then, 10 or 12 are going to be those special properties. So let's get into some of those as we jump down a little bit further. So here, strange purpose, the prophecies, stuff like that really would apply to, um, more magical, mystical locations. And then our third deck is all about wilderness locations. So this is more about wilderness exploration, or as you're traveling through the wilderness, or setting up a more wilderness area that's less settled. And so here we've got Fungal Warren and a Spider Cave, Buzzing Bowl. uh, so what menace nest here? You've got swarms of murder pixies. I love that. Um, but you've got fungal folk too, and zombie squirrels. Sure, laugh while you can. So you see what I'm saying, where Andrew really does an imaginative job of coming up with all these strange options. I really, really love it all. And, you can get the download if you're not able to read it all on screen here. Get the download, and you can peruse it at your leisure. But there's a lot of cool stuff there. And then moving into, again, the traits here. So we've got traits that would apply to wilderness areas, like, hey, this area is unusually fertile, stuff like that. Where did my mouse go? There we go. Fey investment. Okay. Yeah. Watch out for that. So you've got all those things, but then the final few cards are going to be reference cards, and they're going to be tailored for each of the decks. We originally wrote this particular one for the wilderness deck. And this is all about a hex crawls overview. The other decks, so your your otherworldly deck will be more tailored and give you some charts and more options and more advice for areas like those. And the settled lands is going to give you some special advice and charts and stuff for those locations. So what you're seeing here is really, like I said, what we've got coming from the wilderness deck. And here we just wanted to give you an overview of what hex crawls are all about, and how to make one, and how the maps, how to make maps in a couple of different ways, what scale to choose, and then how frequently should you stock stuff in your location, which I've kind of already summarized that, as far as hey, have a handful of locations that are immediately around the starting location, then have a handful more that are further out, that are possibly stronger, have a greater influence, such that the players might hear a rumor from those other places that are more than a day's travel away, for example. And then jumping down the next one, so what to detail in this whole concept. A lot of people have already, this isn't unique to us. I've read through a number of hex crawl books and rules and advice and everything, and this is me trying to distill all that into a handful of cards. And so then one of the things is there's the concept of obvious, discovered, hidden, where you have one thing that's obvious if you're just kind of looking at it as you're not quite getting into that hex, but you're kind of looking at it from nearby, from the adjacent hex, if you will, depending on the scale. Or maybe you are getting into it. But then you've got something that's discovered that takes a little bit more time to unearth, but you can kind of pretty much figure it out by just going through. And then hidden is something where it takes some more interaction to figure out that hidden detail about that location. We also give you some travel rates and some rules for getting lost and rules for foraging if you want to cut down on your use of supplies. Roles, so there's a number of different roles that your party members might have as they're out exploring, which can have an impact on things like, hey, If you have somebody that's dedicated to mapping, you're going to be less likely to get lost. Weather ideas. Again, in this case for weather, we could have a whole nother deck of cards to help you figure out weather patterns for each of 8 or 10 or 12 biomes, depending on how you want to divide things up and season and stuff like that. And then hex crawl encounters and some advice on creating encounters. Um, this came from, I want to say, I'm going to confuse if it came from Professor Dungeon Master or, there's, well, or Baron, yeah, Baron. So one of the other YouTube folks had this idea of, hey, you come up with a chart for your encounters, not just for the creatures, but, come up with a chart of activities that they're doing and complications that they have. Um, and then when you roll separately. Hey, you know, maybe your hobgoblins are, instead of spying, maybe they're raiding. That makes a lot of sense. Or scavenging. They might be doing that. Well, what does that tell you? If the hobgoblins are scavenging, ooh, they're really under hard times. What's up with that? Why is that the case? And then complication. Originally your hobgoblins, might have been running out of water. Well, that could tie in with the scavenging too. But it could be that they're rabid. So hey, why are they rabid? Interesting. So that came from them, and it's a really concept that I really like. And we can't give you enough charts to do the entire. We can't give you enough of these charts for every possible campaign setting. But we give you the background of the logic behind it, the reasoning behind it, and how to create your own. Then we've got for settlement specifically, we've got a number of locations that or number of details about the locations. Hey, what's the government like? What are the defenses? What's the leader like? And then what are some of the some traits about that location? It might be one trait if it's a small village, and two if it's a town, and cities might have three or more. And here's a number of names. Names are, at least for me, hard to come up with on the fly, but you stick this one card behind, to the back of your GM screen or whatever, and you've got something for, an easy way to come. You're looking for the name of a dwarven fortress. Okay, you've got Gemhammer or Gem Fist or whatever, Wormever. So you've got a number of options there. That's pretty cool to have. And you should be able to vary that from there. You can change the spelling a little bit and things like that to kind of get more unique results. So that's a look at what the Hexploration decks are going to be all about. Like I said, we're going to have a link down below to get notified when we launch this come towards the end of January. But again, that does really help us if you will follow it. If you're interested, then that helps us plan, because we do have 3 of these decks all fully written, and I'm confident that if we wanted to, we can do a 4th deck. We've got the plans for a 4th deck, and that's something that I'm sure Andrew can write quickly. Even if we get halfway into the campaign and we decide then, hey, we want to do that 4th deck. That's something that I'm sure that he can turn around in just a matter of a few weeks, so that it wouldn't have any significant impact on delivery. And then we've got a number of artists. If we have to divide it up amongst several artists, we can do that. But I will say the Forge Studios really did turn things around very quickly as well. So I'm not worried about that. All right, I've droned on. I've droned on long enough about this. Like I said, check out the link and support this if you think you're interested. Thanks a bunch. Bye.